Hey everyone, and welcome to the next video in our notes series. Today we're going to talk about the role that peers at play and playing have on our own cognitive development and social development as individuals. So in looking at peers in play, this actually starts the second out of three subtopics on developmental psychology that we're going to be looking at. And in this one, we are looking at elements that influence social and cognitive development. So we're going to be looking at peers in play today, and then also the role that poverty plays in development, and then also the role that trauma and resilience play in the development of us socially and cognitively. Um, so we'll move on at this point to looking at peers in play more directly. And we'll start off with peer influence. So although the influence of peers is generally associated with teenagers instead of children, uh, this does not mean that the role is not quite large for even small children, right? In terms of how we cognitively learn and how we socially grow, peers can have a great influence over this. You know, even kids that are in the crib, a lot of mothers and fathers want their children to be exposed to other children so that they can start to pick up socially those habits and get used to other children as well. And this has cognitive and social influences on us. So we're going to first start off by looking at the study of Ash 1956. And we've always talked about this in terms of conformity because the aim of this was to determine whether individual participants would conform to majority influence. In terms of peers in play, we're going to be thinking about it in terms of the peer influence that conformity has on us. So as we talked about, they took participants and put them in a room with 6 other people, and the 6 other people were Confederates, or they were actors that were told to answer a certain way. And unknown to the target participant, they would also be giving the wrong answer to comparing one line to 3 other lines when they were asked to say which line was closest to that one line. So in terms of the results and conclusion, more than a third of the participants agreed with the Confederates in 50% or more of the trials. 3/4 of the participants conformed at least once. And so what we can take from this is that even in unambiguous situations, there is still pressure to conform to a unanimous majority. And so when we are thinking about peers in play, it also demonstrates the power that peers have on others, even when those peers are strangers, right? And so even as adults, we can have great influence comes from our peers. Now imagine the influence of peers on children and adolescents who want to fit in. And so we can start to see the case for the influence of peers on our own cognitive and social development. So that leads us into our next study, and that's Todd et al. From 1971. And the idea here is that the mere fact of belonging to 2 different groups, even if they are trivial, can trigger in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination. So the aim was to investigate the effects of social categorization on intergroup behavior, so how they act between each other in a minimal group paradigm. So they took, again, 64 male students at a school in Bristol, England. They came from the same school, all knew each other well. And what happened was that they were first shown 40 slides with clusters of dots. They were shown it very quickly. They were asked to estimate the number of dots. And then they were then split into teams on the basis of having 4 overestimators and a group of 4 underestimators. So in the stage 2 of this, they were given a booklet filled with different people's answers and told to give rewards on the basis of how well they did on the exercise. And they were told in some cases that this person was on their team, other people were not. So what they found was that the mean choice in the different group matrices was 9.2. And in the end, what's really important is that they ended up giving more points to those people who were on their teams. And so what we can conclude is that participants will demonstrate in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination, even when you are divided on the basis of trivial criteria. Now, what does this mean for peers in play? Well, what we can take from this is that, even peers where we are sort of categorized based on sort of meaningless criteria. I mean, we like each other's personality, I guess. That's why we hang out with each other. Or not so meaningless is that maybe we have friends based on where we live, that sort of stuff. But the influence of peers is great. We can reward each other more for being part of that in-group. And peer groups are often in-groups to each other, and they see other friend groups as being out-groups to their own friend group. So a few strengths of the Todgeful task. For one, it's replicable. They've repeated in different forms with similar results. In terms of the limitations, it does have possible limited application. These were boys in their early teens. Who knows how maybe children would react when given the same sort of play situation with peers. And then they also only showed discriminatory behavior only if the particular situation of being required to make decisions. They did not show outward actions towards other people. So that leads us into another way in which we benefit from peers, and that's the idea of theory of mind. So theory of mind is the ability to understand someone's perspective and that it is different from one's own perspective. And we've talked about this several different times throughout the course of not only this unit, but of the last few units as well. So there was evidence to suggest that interactions with peers can strongly influence the development of theory of mind in the child. Right? And so children can develop this skill at about 3 years old. And we saw this in the Bork study, right? And so even though Piaget felt like theory of mind did not develop until about the age of 7, influence of peers and interactions with peers can allow us to grow those abilities earlier. And so by playing and interacting with other children, the individual, and I'm sorry for my marker skills today, an individual will start the process of developing an understanding of others. And so this emphasis of peer interaction ends up increasing with age. However, the idea of play, according to research, might not as heavily influence theory of mind's development as just emphasis of peer interaction. As far as play goes, this involves enjoyable activities that are unrelated to survival, production, or profit. And up until the 1950s, play was generally thought to be a worthless and fruitful childhood activity. And so, after this point, though, the work of people like Piaget sort of showed that actually play helps children to develop cognitively and socially in a lot of different ways. So in terms of how we think about play, there are actually 6 different categories which define the play modes that children participate in. So the first one is where children are unoccupied, but they are rather observing. So you're sort of sitting on the sidelines where you're thinking about things and looking at other children playing. Number 2, solitary, and they are occupied with something, although unaware of or indifferent to peers, right? So if you are in preschool or something like that and you have a toy and you're just playing with it in the corner, that would be somewhere where you are solitary and sort of indifferent to peers. Also, I would say that, even like video games would be something where, especially if you're not talking to anyone on the headset or playing online, this is where you're solitary and you're occupied, though unaware of or indifferent to peers. And what we found is that this is more common in the under 4 age group. Perhaps the child hasn't been socialized fully yet. Number 3, onlooker. So they watch activity and interact by talking to peers about what is happening rather than actually joining in, right? So if you're watching like someone play Foursquare and you're sort of just asking questions and sitting on the side, don't have really an interest in playing as of yet, you're just sort of learning about it, that would be the onlooker. Number 4, parallel play. Similar activities played separately from others, and you're mimicking rather than play interaction. So if you're playing basketball, I see this a lot. While the players are on the other side of the court, playing, um, someone will come on to the half of the court that's not being used at that exact second and start shooting around. And so they're sort of mimicking what's going on. They're sort of using observation there. Number 5, associative play. So this is where there's an attempted interaction between the individual and the peer group without fluent social coordination with the group. So you join in late with whatever they're doing. And then number 6, cooperative play, where the individual fluently interacts with both the peer group and with the activity. Now, in terms of where cognitive development grows, it's in categories 3 through 6. Right? So from the point of being an onlooker where they are actively talking to peers about what is happening, sort of thinking about and gaining a greater understanding of the play activity, parallel play, associative play, and then cooperative play as well. Now, as far as assimilation goes, we talked about assimilation when we talked about cognitive development with Piaget. And so according to Piaget, play was a part of the process of the assimilation of ideas. And this becomes vital to learning. And so when a child tests out the environment according to previously learned concepts, so things like climbing a tree or building a sandcastle or imagining that they are a police officer or playing house, all of these are vital to building our ideas about what this entails. And so exploratory and role-playing activities like this involve consolidating ideas in a pleasurable way rather than learning something new. As far as the cognitive and social benefits of play, again, this is based on the idea that children do not passively receive their knowledge. They are curious, they are self-motivated, they are deeply interested in discovering and interacting with their environments. And so play enables children to create and operate a world that they can master, right? And this builds self-efficacy. This builds, cognition. This helps with modifying and regulating behaviors. And social benefits of play also include the experience of working in groups, being cooperative, dealing with conflicts, whether they are real life or pretend, and then learning to speak up for oneself. All of these things can be really helpful when not only interacting with peers, but also when playing and imagining. Sorry for the early cutoff there. So as far as Vygotsky goes, in terms of how he viewed play, Vygotsky felt like play can really promote and consolidate the development in a rich zone of proximal development. You are learning more about the world around you by interacting with peers, and after a while you guys start to come up with more and more sophisticated ideas. And so the activities that they can participate in prompt new areas for exploration. So as Vandenberg said in 1986, play not so much reflects thought as it creates thought. And so play cognitively and socially advances the child's development and supports it as well. So, for example, and we have two here, if you're thinking about what cases this takes place in, joining in a playground game with greater complexity, like a complex point system which builds math skills. I know for myself, even playing just solitarily by myself, I'm pretty good at mental math, I believe, because I would always be creating games, to play outside. There wasn't a lot of kids that lived around us. And so there'd be a lot of times where, I'm counting a lot. I'm trying to figure out like, averages and stuff like that in order to continue this game. Another way is to build model boats that won't sink or turn over. You're learning engineering properties by doing that, and it's a series of trial and error. And that can push our own learning forward. That can make us more interested in learning about something and pushing our zone of proximal development further. As far as creativity goes, creativity is the process of producing original ideas in both art forms and in problem solving. And play is argued to facilitate creativity in children because you are able to test ways of problem solving through object play. And so even in terms of like managing others, these can help resolve issues. They can help resolve conflict. And so simulations and play of this nature are very, very helpful. And then as far as play goes and theory of mind, we talked about it with peer influence, but play may also facilitate the development of theory of mind, even if research has not backed this up. And that's what I referred to earlier in the notes series, or in this particular video, I should say. And prior to successful development of the skill, theorists end up arguing that social play is important as role play can allow the child to think about what they must do as another person, and that strengthens our skill. So even something like playing house, you are thinking about things through the lens of, the models around you, right? And so because the role is different from the individual's role, it helps them to think about another person's perspective and actions. Now, even though I did not have studies on play for um, this particular part of the video, I will say that a couple studies you could use to explain play would be Bandura. You could also use Piaget and Inhelder. You could use Bork. Those three studies would be very good in terms of explaining the role that play has on the individual. All right, with that being said, if you have any questions on peers and play, please let me know. And I hope you all have a great day.